Welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Susie Horton. I'm the chair of the Planning Committee. A little bit of housekeeping before we start and safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery, or there's no one up there, by the stairwells. Don't attempt to use the lifts and assemble by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. If you did sign in at the reception, please sign out for fire marshal regulations reasons. And this meeting is live web streamed so that people can watch remotely if they wish. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputation, so please be aware of that. And the public seating area is not in view of the cameras. Members of the press and public are permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone speaking use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. A little bit on voting. When voting, please can members keep their hands raised clearly until the number of votes have been stated. And I will indicate whether that's for, against, or abstentions. Okay, so we'll do some introductions. As I said, I'm Councillor Susie Horton. We'll start with the councillors who are on this committee. So I'm going to start here with Councillor Smythe.
Thank you, Chair. Judith Smythe, Vice Chair of Planning and elected member for St Jude Ward.
Good morning, Mary Vallely, Councillor for Cosham and Wimmering.
Councillor Hugh Mason.
Councillor Peter Candlish, Eastern Increanswater.
Good morning, Chair. Councillor Matthew Cordy, member for Hilsey.
Good morning, Councillor Derek Knowles for Cosham and Wimmering.
Good morning, Councillor Chris Dyke, Paulsgrove Ward.
So I'm Councillor Lee Hunt and I represent Nelson Ward, which covers Stamshaw, Tipner, North End and most of Buckland.
Thank you, councillors. I now go to council officers to introduce themselves.
Good morning. I'm Ian Maguire, Assistant Director for Planning and Economic Growth. Good morning. I'm Edward Chapman-Saleton. I'm here as the case officer for the South Sea Defence application. Thank you.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Juliet Gill, Principal Solicitor for Planning for the Council.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least is the deputies. What I will do is I will start with the non-councillor deputies first. If you could just introduce yourselves, that would be great. So, I'll start with Carrie-Anne.
Carrie-Anne Wells, Agent for Applecore, and I'm representing 3 of the items on the agenda today. Thank you.
In the cream jacket, if you introduce yourself. If you press the button.
Derek Swetnam.
Welcome.
Yes, from Chichester Road.
Welcome, Derek. Are you the only person speaking out of the 3 of you?
Good morning. My name is Debbie Donoghue. I'm the daughter for Mr. and Mrs. Swetnam.
Welcome,
I'll be
Debbie.
Speaking on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll go back to this corner and the other deputies.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Benedict Swan, Copner and Anchorage Park Ward, and I will be speaking on 248 Chichester Road.
I'm Richard Adair. I'm a councillor for Nelson Ward, and I'm speaking on 61 Angerstein Road.
Sorry, I forgot to introduce you. In the corner. Do you want to introduce?
Hi, I'm Cody. I'm in the validation team.
No, you're not speaking. Okay, you're just here for the fun, just here for the observations. Okay, excellent. Thank you. So welcome, everyone. Now to apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Chris Atwell, who will be arriving late, perhaps as late as 11:30. So we will welcome him then. Are there any other apologies that we have received, or I haven't received any further ones? Okay, that's good. Now, the next agenda item is declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest on any of these items? Thank you, members. Just for clarification of the proceedings, particularly for people who are here for the first time, each agenda item will be presented in the following order. The first thing that will happen is the officer's planning application will be presented with all the information. The next thing, that any deputations will be heard, up to 12 minutes in favour and 12 minutes objecting. The next thing that will happen is there'll be a series of members' questions and comments around it, and then finally the planning decision will be made. Okay. So I believe, I think the next agenda item is to just move straight to item 4.
Just need to do the minutes.
Minutes, I just realised. So the minutes of the last meeting, some people were here. Is there anyone happy to propose them who was here last time as an accurate record? Councillor Hugh Mason, thank you very much. Any seconder? Okay. Councillor North, sorry, went out of my head. Councillor North, thank you very much for doing that. Right, now we move on to the, now we've done the minutes, we move on to the first substantive item, which is item 4. Councillor Smythe, you need to put your mic on.
Maybe a mistake in the minutes. I'm raising the minute that's at the bottom of page 5, which I would assume ought to go under 4 to 12 Burbage Grove, but I could be wrong, in which case I misunderstood what was going on at the committee. Hugh, it's the one about you.
Oh yes, that's true. So it's not in reference to your one. It's in reference to Councillor Hugh Mason declared a non-prejudicial interest. But you're right. You're absolutely right.
It's just in the wrong place.
Yes, it needs to go in under Burbage
It's
Grove.
confusing.
Yes, thank you.
That's true.
Yes.
You know, I didn't see that.
I wrestled with it and wondered if I was going mad, and then
No,
I thought I would risk showing that I was.
Thank you very much. You're absolutely spot on. Okay, so now we... Okay, so probably worthwhile stating at this point that item 7, Magdala Road, the application has been withdrawn from this agenda. So we have one less to debate and decide on. Okay, I think that's all the extra things before we go to the first substantive item. So over to Edward for presenting this item.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This application is under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act to vary 2 conditions of a previous Section 73 application, reference 2400987 VOC, and is the latest in a series of Section 73 applications varying the original planning permission approved back in 2019 for the sea defence works along the South Sea seafront from Long Curtain Moat in the west to Eastney in the east. So this application is to vary condition 1, the approved plans by the substitution of a new plan, and condition 10 of the 2019-2024 consent, timing of works which restricted beach recharge operations on subfrontage 6 at the same time as subfrontage 3. This application seeks to vary that to allow that to happen. The reason for this is in the interest of expediency in terms of completing the works within a shorter timescale and to ensure that the beach recharge works are done to provide a primary sea defence against winter storms before the hard defences at seafront, subfrontage 6 start. Before I go into the detail of the application, this slide just shows the scheme in a bit and some key milestones reached so far in the scheme as a whole. the images show completed works at sub-frontage 1 and at sub-frontage 4. These are, I'm sure you've seen these in your perambulations along the seafront. I don't need to go into them in further detail today. This slide, again, you will have seen before and shows the impact that were this scheme not to be constructed, the likely impact of flooding on South Sea and South Portsmouth as a whole. So you can see its importance from that, with over 4 metres of depth of water in deepest locations shown by the purple shading. Back to the application under consideration today. This slide shows the extent of the seafront we're talking about. So from Blue Reef in the west, including South Parade Pier, the Canoe Lake inlet outlet pipe, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then to the Coffee Cup Cafe in the east. It's important to note that the project team has had ongoing liaison with South Parade Pier about these works. I understand that some repair works to the pipes under the pier have been completed by the environmental health team in advance of these works, and there will be no impact. I'm advised by the applicant that there will be no impacts to the pier during the beach replenishment operation, and the pier will remain open throughout. And with a bigger, deeper front-to-back, more stable beach, this will likely provide greater protection to the pier during storm events. Please note that these beach works are already approved. It's only the timing of these works that this application seeks to change. As set out in paragraph 3.15 on page 19 of your agenda, the programme for the proposed works is indicatively timed to fall within a 4-month period between the end of November 25 and the end of March 26. Indicative key dates are as follows. The extension of the Canoe Lake inlet outlet pipe will take approximately 3 to 4 weeks, commencing at the end of November this year. Material will be pumped ashore west of South Parade Pier in late December to early January, and to the east of South Parade Pier from early to late January next year. The transport of shingle material from the pump locations to the profile locations will then take between mid-January and the end of March 27, using terrestrial-based plant diggers, excavators, back-actors, etc. This plan is the new plan is the substitute plan for, hence the variation to condition 1 approved plans, and has been submitted to seek a minor amendment to within sub-frontage 6. Due to the beach recharge works approved as part of the scheme, the existing inlet outlet pipe that fills and drains Canoe Lake, try and get my pen to work, which is shown here, requires extending. The existing inlet outlet links Canoe Lake, an amenity lake landward of the South Sea Coastal Scheme, with the sea, and the pipe is necessary to maintain water levels within Canoe Lake and water purity. The pipe will not need to be stopped up and will remain operational during these works. The existing inlet outlet links Canoe Lake with the sea. The system will include 2 pumps, one to pump water into the lake and one to remove water from the lake. Both pumps are automatic with a level sensor in the lake. A seaward pipe extends from a chamber under Eastney Esplanade and the existing promenade and through the beach to the inlet outlet structure. The inlet outlet requires extending by some 59 metres to ensure that it can remain functional following the import of beach material. With regard to the beach replenishment, as I said before, it's important to note that this is already consented under the primary application, and it's just the timing that is changing as a result of this proposal. The photographs on this slide show the technique that will be used on subfrontage 6, namely that a dredger will bring material from an offshore dredging area to within as close as it can get to the beach, and then the material will be pumped ashore. A key consideration in the determination of this application, and the reason condition 10 was imposed in the first place, is to ensure that nature conservation interests and bird nesting areas are not unduly impacted by the works. As such, and the detail of this is set out in your report in paragraphs 310 to 318. As such, critical to the, excuse me, to the determination of this application are the views of Natural England, and their views are set out in the report on the bottom of page 20 and the top of page 21. And they are raising no objection. They were engaged by coastal partners in extensive pre-application discussions before this application was submitted, and they are raising no objection subject to an updated SEMP, and they're satisfied that the Brent Goose mitigation site P35 will be retained intact during these works. Due to the tidal nature of the activities proposed, works will be undertaken both during daytime and nighttime tides, and I understand that some 450,000 cubic metres of material will be pumped ashore in periods of 4 to 5 hours around each low tide. But there may be instances where machinery will need to work over high tide periods. Engagement with local stakeholders is being undertaken by the applicant to make them aware of any potential impacts, and will be very similar in operation to the works carried out at subfrontage 3 and the rock replacement works around subfrontage 4, which were subject to the same working hours. As I said, all works to date have been done in accordance with the approved SEMP, and a new SEMP will be submitted pursuant to this scheme if it's approved today. The overlap period with subfrontage 3, hence the need to vary the timing condition, is up to 6 months. In that period, the material import will take approximately 4 weeks, and the reprofiling of the imported material will take approximately 6 weeks, although some of that will overlap with the 4-week material import timescale. The extension to the existing Canoe Lake Inlet will take 3 to 4 weeks. Works outside of these main activities will include mobilisation of equipment. The promenade and businesses will remain accessible at all times and open during the beach works. At times, part of the beach east and west of the pier will be closed for health and safety reasons. The material planning considerations are set out in the officer report, and the officer recommendation is to grant permission subject to the updated conditions set out on pages 27 to 38. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
I should add there is no public speaking. Coastal Partners had hoped to make a deputation, but unfortunately can't for personal reasons. But I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you. And I should also add, sorry, final point, in the SMAT, you'll see that, and this will be reflected in the updated decision notice if granted, that all references to the NPPF need to be updated to the current version. Thank you.
Thank you. As you say, there's no deputation, so we'll go straight to members' questions. If anyone has a question, first of all, about the detail of the presentation or the report. Councillor Smythe.
Thank you, Chair. This, just to be absolutely clear, you're saying this application is just about rescheduling, but we've got a copy of the previous permission to inform us. Now, I think that allows me to ask a question about some of the wider things, because in effect we would be approving this with together with the revised timetable. Is that right?
This proposes a revised. This allows for the beach recharge works.
Yes.
The original condition precluded beach recharge works occurring on more than one subfrontage at a time. This allows for beach recharge at subfrontage 6 to be commenced whilst beach recharge works are still finishing off on subfrontage 3.
I understand that, but in effect we're approving the whole application because of needing to approve that change. Is that right? Well, we've still got all of this other information, all the conditions and everything here.
Oh, sorry, all the other conditions remain as per.
Okay, well, I'm not sure whether this is going to be helpful or not, but I would like to see, to know a little bit more about the landscaping. I don't know if it's, I don't quite understand what we're doing, but...
I understand what you're saying. This is my perspective. I understand what you're saying about whether having the entire planning application replicated is, it may be a bit of a red herring, but from my point of view, we're here for two reasons, and that is, and you know what those reasons are. So I'm not too sure what the discussion would add to, unless it is relevant to our decision about the two reasons.
It's not relevant to the decision about two reasons, but I would like just on page 33 for it to be minuted that I am... the only criticism I've ever heard of the sea defence is walking up and down there, swimming and doing other things, is there's not much shelter. And I would like, if it's possible, I would like to just look at, very briefly, to look at paragraphs 15 and 16 under page 33 to make sure that if there is a chance to avoid taking down large trees that give shade, then we should avoid it. And if there is a chance to put in some potentially larger species, where they can be put without weakening the sea defences anyway, to provide a little bit more shade than there is along the rest of the sea defence. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the sea defences and of everything we've done there, but I do hear, and I'm very aware we've had a very warm and sunny spring, that there's too little shade for anybody to sit in. And if landscaping were a chance to do that, given a greater emphasis on biodiversity than there was when we approved this plan, I would like to minute my concern about that and ask for that to be considered. We have delegated those things to officers, so, but I'm taking this opportunity because, especially if we're pulling out large trees, I mean, we haven't got a landscaping plan because we don't need it today, but I would like to draw attention to that. Thank you. I don't know if there's a question.
I'm not sure that was a question.
Well, the question is, can I influence that through this medium, or do I have to do it in some other way?
Councillor, thank you for your question. That is all noted. That falls outside of the remit of this application at this stage, but obviously where details are required to be submitted pursuant to conditions, they will be done, so that will be done in due course.
And could they take into account that comment, or would I need to make that in a different way?
I'm just wondering if there's different forum for actually putting that forward. I know there's consultation this summer, so I'm sure councillors are engaged with that. So that would seem to me to be a better forum to raise it, and officially in a councillor capacity rather than in relation to this specific, really small planning application.
Could you give the public a bit more information about that consultation so that they can look it up?
I have to say, I don't have the dates to hand, but I am aware that there's a roadshow, which they frequently do, which has been advertised. I expect it's on the South Sea Sea Defence's social media and website, and I'm happy to find out more information.
It's a roadshow rather than a consultation, I think, and I know they are taking place at the X-Courts, and also there's another one somewhere else on the seafront, so we can advise people to go to the Sea Defence website and they'll find about it. But I don't think
yes, that's what I just said.
I don't think it's a consultation as such.
But that will be the place to put forward ideas, and also as a councillor, we would be engaging with that, and I'm sure that you'd have an opportunity to put your
Thank you, Chair.
views
I'll use other channels.
Thank you.
It just made me think that this was now in the public domain, and again. And I thought it was worth mentioning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It certainly made me revisit the whole thing by having that information there. So it's really, really interesting to be reminded of the complexity of the whole planning application. However, we are here to focus on two specific things. Are there any other member questions? Councillor Candlish.
Chair, I would just like a restatement, I think I had it right, of the access to the prom throughout the period. So I heard that there was, well, in fact, maybe that's the simplest question to ask. Could you just restate what you said previously? I'm looking to understand whether people will be able to walk from one end from Southsea Castle all the way to Eastleigh while staying on the prom, or will there be periods at which that will not be possible? And if that is not possible, is it possible at this point to know when those are?
As I understand it, Councillor, the prom will remain open to the public at all times. Can I just add further to the Councillor Smythe's earlier question? I've just heard back from the applicant who is kindly watching this meeting and texting me with relevant information. The road shows are to be held on the 16th of August and 10th of September, and landscaping is a condition that will need to come back to committee in due course as well.
That's really useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think the prom has always been closed whenever they've done a particular section. We haven't had a bit of the prom that's not been closed at one stage or another.
I think from what I heard in the presentation, it was some parts of the beach may be closed, but obviously not the prom. So that's good news. Good. Another question, Councillor Mason.
Just a response to that, as the council has oversight of the sea defence works. The promenade can remain open. There will be probably have to be some Harris fencing along to prevent people going onto the beach at the important times.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Any other questions in relation to this application? Okay, I now go to comments. Councillor Hunt.
I hope I don't steal your thunder by moving the officer's report, Chair. All right, I'm sure you're seconding it right now. I mean, what a tremendous project this is. You know, to help Councillor Smythe, I noticed the landscaping. I think and I know they're watching at the moment. I mean, the landscaping in front of Dell is tremendous. The colour and the vibrancy of it is just tremendous. It's very clever because they've been protected by the wall. Unfortunately, trees, they have died, and I've raised this by email with the Coastal Partnership, and they've replied to me within an hour, saying that they'll replace the trees. But I do wonder if that's a sensible thing, because they're so exposed to the salt air and to the heat and the dryness of the seafront, which is why the landscaping has been designed as it is. So I think we can wish for all sorts of things, but trees have a hard time on the seafront, not least due to climate change, which some people believe doesn't exist. But the hot weather has got it in for trees. So, and there's not much way of watering. So I just want to touch on that. The other thing that I wanted to say is that it's really good to hear that there's going to be some work around the Canoe Lake Inlet as a result of this, because that needs some work on it, and that's going to be very good for Canoe Lake. It's just really to say and congratulate them for keeping us all in touch. I mean, I get on Facebook quite a lot, and I've just recently plastered their latest post on Facebook around the place. And I'm sure Councillor Smythe is an avid follower of my posts. And she can read all that they're up to on there almost weekly. I mean, so much information that comes out from the Coastal Partnership is quite incredible. And to hear that they're doing the roadshows, I mean, this has just been the most superb project brought here thanks to Hugh Mason. There are others around that opposed it a few years back, and I'm sure they see, yes, they did, Councillor, I can assure you they did. They wanted to put a beach in, from the beach right up over Southsea Common, and that's history, is written in fact. So they did oppose it, Councillor. And we've got to thank Councillor Hugh Mason for all this hard work and getting, how much is it? I think £52 million worth of work?
Councillor Hunt, Councillor Smythe has an objection to something that you've said.
Sure,
so I'm
go ahead.
I'm going to go to her
Sure.
now. Councillor Smythe.
I just wanted to object. The implication here is that I've opposed the sea defences, which I never had in my party, and that I'm absolutely a fan of the sea defences, and I don't think my party has ever opposed the sea defences.
Okay, Councillor Hunt, can
Well,
you...
I'm terribly sorry. The MP for Portsmouth South certainly did. He tried to stop the money coming here. So I'll get off that. I just want to say what a tremendous project, what a wonderful approach by the Coastal Partnership, backed up by this City Council. We've made a decision about this, and the dates will be changed, not least reflecting the concerns around the natural environment and the nesting, the overwintering birds, which is of course really very important. So I've moved it. Enormously grateful to everybody concerned in this.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt, for moving it. And as you indicated, I'm quite happy to second your proposal. Is there anyone else who wants to make a comment on this? Or Councillor Mason?
Firstly, I'd like to thank the officer for the information concerning the pier, because I knew that the work had to be done on the pier, and so that's very useful information. And coming to the application in front of us, this will save the coastal partners money and it will save time, but especially it will be the most efficient way of doing it, since we will not have to at any stage stand down the system and then bring it up again. So I think on all fronts this is of benefit to the city.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Any other comments? Any other Any other proposals? So we have a motion proposed by Councillor Lee Hunt and seconded by myself. I propose then that we go to a vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. So no abstentions and no one voting against to move officer recommendation. Sorry? I am voting. Okay, that's the first, that's item 4 done. So we now move to agenda item 5, where we do have some deputations following the officer presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. This is 248 Chichester Road, the change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to a 7-bed, 7-person HMO. There is the property you can see on the corner there on Chichester Road, for those that like to have a look at it. I will now take you to the SMAT and take you through some corrections and clarifications. When reviewing this report, it was identified there has been a couple of errors in how the numbers have been reported. I can leap to the end and confirm officers are satisfied that a positive recommendation is the correct approach for this application, but to ensure members have exactly the correct information, the image that you have in your papers, to be absolutely clear, that is on page 44 below paragraph 8.8. You'll see on that a purple star on the right-hand side of that image. That star has been drawn on 260 Chichester Road. It is not, however, an HMO. 262 is the HMO, the adjacent property that is beyond 50 metres. Apologies for that error. Consequently, that is not an HMO to be included within the 50-metre count. The address list provided accompanying that also incorrectly includes 2 flats at 217 Chichester Road on the far left of the image. So again, apologies, that does change the numbers a little bit when it comes to properly identifying the relevant issue. The image in itself, that big purple circle is correct, pink circle is correct. It's just making sure that we are giving you the correct information about what is in and outside of that in accordance with your standard published methodology of counting. That's, however, not it. The officer has also failed to properly describe to section 257 HMOs. That's the 2 red stars I put on the image here, 219, 221, far top left image across for that. To assist members on this, and members will have seen an email I sent them yesterday, and I've covered some of the key pertinent points in the supplementary matters papers as well. Section 257 HMO is a very unusual form of HMO. To be blunt, it's not an HMO, but our SPD does provide guidance that we should include it within our HMO count, and it is covered by the Housing Act under those appropriate settings. HMOs, as members know, are usually a group of people, more than three, living together in a house of multiple occupancy, so with their sole rights to have their own bedroom, but then sharing basic amenities, kitchens, bathrooms, those sorts of things. A Section 257 is a very different kettle of fish. It is a converted building, in this case, Terrace House, 219, 221, those two converted houses, that when they were converted, and we're going back 30 odd years when they were converted into two flats each, they were done in a way that didn't fully meet building standards at the time. Habitually, this is actually fire safety. The separation between the two flats wasn't adequate. I wasn't writing legislation for the government at the time. Why they decided to do it this way, I can't help you with. But rather than deal with the fire safety issue through building regulations, as we do now, and indeed there are plenty of building conversions that are fully compliant with Part F of the building regulations and other fire safety issues, the decision was made by legislatives to manage this risk through management, i.e. use a private sector licensing approach, i.e. HMO approach. That obviously can ensure there's smoke detectors and all these kind of things, and an ongoing up-to-date management plan through that ongoing and enduring engagement that licensing have with landlords. So only applies on converted buildings, only on converted buildings that didn't meet building standards when they were converted, and only on those that are at least 2/3 not owner-occupied. So wonderfully confusing, and it's even more confusing because obviously if the owner moves into these things, that can change it and stop it being a Section 257 HMO. Really is a confusing area, so I do apologise for that. The two flats in each of these buildings are themselves C3 dwellings. So the shell, the block, the house, is an HMO, and our guidance, I must admit, I'm not sure it is the best guidance we can give you, but it's our adopted guidance, says we should include them in the identified HMOs when making our HMO count. But the individual flats inside that block are themselves C3. So 219 Chichester Road is one HMO block with two C3 flats. If I was to add all of those numbers up into the denominator of our percentage, obviously that's 3 units from one house. That doesn't make sense. So to provide, and our members will recall me saying, and I don't know what the sweepstakes for today was, but we don't do planning by numbers, but the numbers are here to guide us. And so to enable a sensible number to be produced, I propose that the correct way to manage this in line with our guidance is to count both 219 and 221 individually as a block that is an HMO, so it appears as one residential unit that is an HMO. So rather than one residential unit which is not an HMO, which makes no sense, or one residential unit which is an HMO and two non-HMO residential units, counting it as one for one makes a lot more sense, as if it had been converted, rather than two-bed flats with 4 people living in that 219, as is the case. It could, of course, been converted at that time into one 4-bed HMO, and we wouldn't be having all of this confusion. So to identify the easiest way to properly enumerate it within our arithmetical approach to the mix and balance, I propose that we count them on that basis. Adding all of these issues up, the 217 correction, the 262 correction, and properly counting up these two 257 HMOs, that gives us 5 out of 59 properties. There are, of course, overall 61 residential addresses, but 59 properties for the purpose of this numerical assessment, i.e. 8.47% below the 10%. As members would have noted from the SMAT and from my email yesterday, the key matter, as always, is the judgment of whether this creates an appropriately mixed and balanced community. As I say on page 3 of the SMAT, This area has a range of housing types. There's one existing C4, actually it's a dual use C3, C4 HMO, one existing 7-bed HMO, 2 of these 257 blocks, each containing 2 flats, 10 other flats that aren't Section 257 flats. We've looked through each of those individually, looked at their planning history and their licensing history, and 44 terraced houses, as well as indeed a pharmacy. Consequently, converting the 45th house into an HMO, I am satisfied, is resulting in a mix and balance within this community that is appropriate and is not causing any demonstrable harm, and is also arithmetically comfortably below that 10% line. Final thing just to mention, residents who did some tremendous work reviewing the local area did also identify 2 further properties, 242 and 252, which they were feared may be used without consent. They have neither planning permission nor licence as an HMO. The enforcement team have been looking at that, and I provided an update in the email and SMAT. I can update that update. We actually had contact from both of these properties this morning after the SMAT was produced, and I can confirm that neither are in use as HMOs. They are occupied as single family dwellings. One is rented out to 2 people, albeit there is a 3rd person on the electoral register, but their tenancy agreement does allow that my boyfriend can move in, and the other is a family home with more than 1 generation of adults living in it. So both of those I can confirm with entire confidence are not HMOs, and clearly if at any point in the future the family living in it or the landlord owning it wish to convert it to an HMO, they'd have to apply, and it will be judged at that time on its own merits. As I say, when we look at the numbers, therefore, I am satisfied that this does not create an unbalanced or unreasonable mix to the character of the area, and it therefore complies with with policy PCS 20 of your local plan. To look at the application more widely, therefore, there is the building as is, and as you can see, as usual, permitted development extensions are proposed to be carried out to it. So there is a fairly standard terrace, it's end of terrace property. Obviously the 3-metre rear extension and dormer windows allows for the 7 bedrooms, which are all en suite to be created, and the size of all the rooms is laid out in paragraph 8.17 on page 45, and as you can see, while the smallest is 10.1 metres, we have checked all of these numbers. We are satisfied that they meet our requirements, and therefore they are all fully compliant with your room size requirements, and therefore on a numerical basis satisfied PCS 23. These rooms are also relatively regular in shape and size. And to be absolutely clear, room 1, there, the bottom right-hand image, you can see the hashed area is the 75% above the necessary issue. The blue line, which you may not be able to see on this one, I hope you can, just that's the edge of the 1.5 square metres. That's where they measure to. To ensure that areas below 1.5 aren't counted in that number, and that gives us the 11.4. So we are satisfied all of these rooms are 10 metres above, and with 25.17 square metres laid out in a fairly standard and organised way for the kitchen and communal space. We are satisfied this would make a good living environment for future residents. Finally, to close it off, you can see it's an end of terrace, as I say, so it's got access to the back fairly unrestricted, and there is a single garage at the far back of the property, which would be retained for cycle storage. I think that probably covers all the key matters. Obviously, very happy to take any questions, and do understand the nature of the 257 HMOs is quite confusing, and I do apologise for the errors in the count that have certainly not assisted these matters. And finally, Chair, if you may allow me a personal comment, the residents that have made a submission on this and are here for a deputation today have clearly done a lot of work to understand and clearly feel very deeply about their property, and I would like to thank them for that work. I have looked at every one of the properties identified in that deputation to bring you the number which I am personally entirely satisfied with, but I would like to thank the residents, and I've informed them of the SMAT, but obviously they are on the back foot having to change their presentation with this later information, for which I apologise.
Thank you, Ian. So we have 3 deputations, and I will go to Debbie Donoghue, who is objecting to the application, to go first, and notwithstanding what Ian has said about you probably having to change a little bit of what you've prepared in the light of new information. So thanks very much.
Good morning, Chair and councillors. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on this item. My name is Debbie Donoghue, and I'm speaking today on behalf of my parents who live next door to the proposed application site, and they've been, having been living there for over 40 years. Despite their older years, they remain passionate and interested in local affairs and continue to serve the community with their voluntary work. It is somewhat regrettable that despite direct verbal communication with the owners next door, they made no mention of their proposed change of use to an HMO. Thus, it was a complete shock and caused great anxiety for my parents when they first heard via the notification from the planning department. They are very concerned about the application and the impact on their current home life and that of their neighbours. We would wish to state, though, that this objection is not about just resisting change or development. It is based upon legitimate concerns for all persons involved, including the proposed tenants and the neighbouring community. We are still objecting to the proposal to convert a small 3-bedroom dwelling into a 7-bed HMO. And prior to the information received this morning of the changes and in further investigations by the planning department, our objections related to the implementation of planning policy, highways and noise. The planning policy objectives that we had originally, which have been we investigated, as the planning officer said, may now have subsequently changed in the light of the new information that has come to light. So I will not go through all of that. But our results, yes, they were obtained by walking the area and looking at the properties, counting bins, talking to various neighbours, exploring the roads and checking the electoral roll. And we did have some discrepancy in the number of HMOs that we found at the time and so on, which gave us the concern for having possibly a breach of the 10% requirement. We were concerned at the time as well that perhaps there needed to be a different method for determining applications, as it seemed quite subjective as to where the line was drawn and so on. And when dealing with the applications that have such a significant impact on neighbourhoods and people's lives, there surely needed to be a lot more certainty and accuracy in order to be fair and just. This may well now have been resolved, as I say, by those recent investigations. We felt that the policies exceeded the 10% requirement and was contrary to policy PCS 20, as we were concerned that there was a concentration or proliferation of HMOs within the local area. We are concerned still about car parking. At present, there are double yellow lines outside the application property, and my parents do have a disabled space outside theirs. The removal of the garage will remove 1 parking space from the property, and we understand the remaining garage is to be used for cycle parking. This results in no parking on site. No spaces for a 7-bed unit would result in a significant shortfall in car parking, and will already add to the high demand for parking in the area. Indeed, when I'm visiting my parents, very rarely can I park near their house. I have to park several streets away. And indeed, the owners themselves are aware of this current problem with parking, as they've painted red signage across their garages stating, "Stop parking here." I'm not sure how the highways officer can say that car parking demand for a small 3-bedroomed house would be the same for a 7-bed HMO. In addition, there's no evidence provided in the form of a car park survey to prove that there is capacity within the area. This is contrary to the requirements of the SPD, paragraphs 3.6 to 3.9. Noise. We are very concerned about the noise that will emanate from a 7-bedroomed HMO. This will surely be much greater than a 3-bedroomed house. If permission is granted, we would request strongly, please, that there should be some form of noise insulation installed, especially along the party wall, and maybe even to the proposed building into the garden, which will be adjacent to my parents' garden. In a city as densely populated as Portsmouth, we are looking to you as our councillors to have regard to the local residents' concerns about the significant impact on local communities in terms of character and the loss of our neighbourhoods. On another point, to note that we see on this agenda there are 2 other 7-bed HMOs which have attracted 24 objections in total. This clearly shows that there remains great concern amongst local residents to the spread of this type of application. It is in our opinion that as submitted, the planning application is certainly still contrary to policies CS17. We had listed contrary to CS20 and CS23 as well, but this may well now have been covered with the new information provided by the Planning Department. Thank you all so much for listening to us today and letting us come here and at least have our voices heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I'd just like to echo what Ian said about the depth of research and information that you've put into that deputation. I mean, it's really clear, and thank you for sticking to the planning reasons for actually your objection. Okay, so now I'm coming on to the next deputation, which is in favour of the application. It's over to Carrie-Anne Wells.
Thank you. So 248 Chichester Road. So on this particular property, all the bedrooms meet or exceed 10 square metres. The required communal area for 7 people when the rooms meet the 10 square metre room size is 22.5, and this property provides 25 square metres of communal.
Carrie-Anne, can you bring your mic a little bit nearer?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Is that better? All of the bedrooms also benefit from an ensuite. As mentioned in the officer report, an existing balcony serving bedroom 4 has been removed or is proposed to be removed, and a fully glazed door has been added to the bedroom below to ensure the occupant of the ground floor bedroom has good access to light. Removing the existing balcony will also increase the privacy for the neighbouring property. I note there have been a number of objections stating that a number of flats need to be counted as HMOs, and in planning terms I do not believe that the Section 257 properties referred to are HMOs and should not be counted as such within the current policy. However, we are where we are, and it does state that in the SPD. A Section 257 may be required to be licensed. However, these are buildings that have been converted into self-contained flats where the conversion didn't fully comply with building regs and where less than 2/3 of the flats are owner-occupied. They do not meet the definition of an HMO definition in planning terms of a property occupied by 3 or more unrelated individuals who share basic amenities like a kitchen or bathroom. They are purely properties that were poorly converted and may have increased fire risks and require licensing to ensure this is monitored and that measures are taken to reduce any potential fire risks. Because of the scrutiny this application has had with Officer of Dedicated Detention, I think you can still be confident that 248 Chichester Road, even being approved today, will still ensure the 10% density is not breached. There is a cycle store, quite a large cycle store with an existing outbuilding at the rear, so this should encourage tenants to be able to cycle if they chose. I wanted to pick up on a couple of the issues that Mrs. Donoghue had. So I'm going to speak to the owner regarding your concerns, and if you want to give me your details, I'm happy to pass them over and ask her to contact you as well, so that you can get in touch and discuss any concerns directly. Noise insulation will be upgraded to both the party walls. They do actually need to do that for building control anyway. And the increased building regulation standards for the extension, so the new build out the back, will also ensure that the newer extension will have far greater acoustic properties than that of the existing. So again, the cavity walls and the thickness of insulation that these properties now have, or are now required to have, is hugely increased on the existing building. The property is fully compliant with policy, and I trust that you agree with officer recommendation today. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Carrie-Anne. And the last deputation is from Councillor Benedict Swan, who called in the application.
Thank you, Chair. My first comment on this application is that the proposed plans were revised on the 1st of July 2025. However, the original proposed plans have been removed from the portal I wonder if the planning officers could comment on this, as it's my understanding that all relevant documentation for an application should be publicly accessible. Whether intended or not, it does give the image of something untoward going on. On the revised proposed plans, it says bedroom 4, removed door and balcony and replaced with a window. From the elevation drawing, it looks like it will be a half-height window. Before it was possibly a full-length glass panel door. With the concerns over light in previous applications, I'm not sure why this door has been removed to put a smaller window in that reduces light in the room. It would stand to reason you'd put a window the same size. I note that bedroom 1 now has a door on the plans. However, bedroom 1's ensuite looks under height to me. It's very doubtful if 75% of this ensuite's floor space would be 2.3 metres or over. I would say it looks more like 60 to 65%. There's also a line which shows 1500 millimetres. This is equivalent to 4'9", so you would have to be rather short to use the facilities in any reasonable comfort. There's also no height measurements on the planning section, so although it states that for bedroom 1, 75% of the floor space is full height, it doesn't say what that height is. Bedroom 5, 6 and 7 are all under 10 metres squared once unusable space has been deducted. Conversely, the communal area is labelled as 25.17 metres square. This would need to be 34 metres square if, as it looks, bedroom 5, 6 and 7 are below 10 metres square. I also note that the plans mention nothing about whether the development is to have macerators in the en-suites or kitchenettes in the bedrooms. This is something we're seeing more and more, and this info needs to be included in the applications so that residents are aware exactly what is going on and that they will need to be prepared for the noise of the macerators and that there may be an increased fire risk should kitchenettes be installed. Say nothing for the further reduction of floor space in the properties after the point of decision. I know developers state that they're keen to keep residents on side and work with neighbours, so this would be a great start if people knew exactly what was happening with the property at application stage. I see the supplemental planning matters document has almost 3 pages of clarifications on HMO counts on this one application. Proof, if proof were needed, of the urgent need to get our house in order as far as the registers are concerned. I'm very concerned that the space of this property is below the standard expected by this committee, and I hope they will take this into consideration. Finally, it's an interesting point that if, as is often stated, HMOs are not problematic, cause no issues, and concerns are overblown, why the wall of silence when these properties are sold for this purpose? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Swan, and thank you to all the people doing deputations. Just before we move on, Councillor Atwell has arrived at the meeting, so welcome. Are there any declarations of interest?
No declarations of interest, Chair, and apologies for lateness.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, before we go to member questions, whether it's worthwhile asking whether some of the questions that Councillor Swan raised could be answered.
I can certainly answer some of them. As I say, officers are entirely satisfied. All the rooms are above the necessary 10 metres. The entire ensuite is over 1.5 square metres. These are our adopted numbers, so these are not unusual. I have no concerns about the room sizes. The smallest bedroom is 10.1, which is a number larger than 10. The other questions, macerators, no, it's not part of the planning process, so that's not something we would seek to answer. That's actually dealt with by building regulation, and then if not operated correctly and resulting in a noise nuisance would be covered accordingly. As the applicant stated, dealing with the residents' concerns, there is a requirement under Part E of the building regulations to upgrade sound insulation as part of these sorts of work, so they will be brought up to modern standards, again outside the planning control, but just to give members that reassurance. I'm just having a quick look at the system around the updated plan. We get some contradictory advice nationally about whether what should be held on a planning record for both GDPR and all of that sort of stuff, as well as ease and use. I would agree that a superseded plan should still be on there. I don't know why it was removed in this case. I would be satisfied, however, that has no prejudicial impact on anybody. It is obviously that revision B plan, the one that's before you today, which is to be considered. I'll look at what protocols led to that being taken off of the public website and see if there's anything that needs to be updated there.
Thank you, Ian, for answering all these questions. Okay, members' questions. Councillor Hunt.
Well, thank you to all the officers who looked at this and investigated it really thoroughly. I want to ask some kind of general questions. So first, one thing I want to establish, is the size of this property increased in any way through permitted development, which is why we're seeing a 3-bedroom house going over to a 7-bedroom house? I have 3 questions. That's the first one, Mr. Maguire.
To answer that quickly, yes, as mentioned in the presentation, there's a 3-metre rear extension and dormer windows, the standard alterations, if your members have seen it many times before, but all under permitted development.
Yeah, of course, that people do worry, Chair, when they see that. They think work is underway without planning permission, but through deregulation, that is allowed. There's nothing we can do about that. The other question I wanted to ask about, which is something that is mentioned a lot, and Councillor Swan mentions it today, is this notion, this idea, this observation of unusable space within rooms, particularly when they're borderline, which some of these rooms are. What happens when has there been any view given on cases, sorry to shove this one at you, on cases from the planning inspector when the committees sent it to, rejected it on unusable space? If I remember, in some communal areas, the planning inspector had supported us, but lately I've noticed the planning inspectors do not support us. So is there an emerging view, opinion? I know they can change from time to time, but an opinion from the planning inspector if these things are rejected on those grounds, Mr. Maguire?
I cannot recall any application where the committee has come to a decision that that space is unusable that has gone through the appeal process to give us a position either way. I'm just asking my team if they can recall anything. There was one case, it was an officer recommendation, so it wasn't a committee disagreement, where it was in the north of the city, and apologies, I'm struggling to remember the address, where the ground floor had about 5 doors off of the communal space into various bedrooms and other routes, as well as a stair termination. Officers were concerned and members agreed that the amount of desire lines and traffic joining up all of those doors and routes meant that that communal space was little more than a large corridor, and thus it wouldn't be effective. We lost that appeal. That was an area where I think it was unarguable in my view that a lot of space was used by movement and door swings and all those kind of things, and we didn't win that one. So that's the only appeal I can recall where the actual usability of space in a room has been tested, and certainly the idea that a space that we've deemed which was shown on the plan but wasn't usable, the inspectorate were satisfied that that wasn't a concern in their view. So it is not a strong argument to make.
Well, thank you for that information. I think that's quite revealing when we look at that particular aspect of things. As officers, and we were agreeing, and the planning inspector still didn't agree with the local planning authority here about unusable space. The third one I wanted, you can make it as long or short as you like, Mr. Maguire, but I wonder if you can tell me what the National Planning Policy Framework says, apart from the room sizes and standards, what the National Planning Policy Framework actually says about houses in multiple occupancy. My understanding is it's silent on it.
Yes, it doesn't talk about room sizes either. Yes, the NPPF is a large strategic document. It doesn't cover HMOs. A lot of the communal living issues, co-living, HMOs, etc., are largely silent in national guidance. That's why we have our own local policy and adopted SPD.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's all good remind.
Are there any further questions, particularly in relation to the application we have in front of us? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. One of the issues that we need to take into consideration for this application, as we're told in the agenda, is highways and parking. Now, as Debbie mentioned in her deputation, this road is already suffering from a saturation of vehicles. I was wondering if a curbside parking survey has taken place, and if it hasn't, why hasn't it?
So no parking survey isn't taken place. As the resident identified, guidance on where such additional surveys are necessary is covered in section 3.6 of our parking SPD, and it is where they're not meeting the adopted standard, or they're making that additional impact. In this case, your standard for 6 and 7 bed HMOs is the same as your standard for a house of the same size, and this house, albeit it's been extended through PD, is therefore the same. So it's not a comparison of who lived there before against 7 HMOs against the PD works they're doing, which they're entitled to do. That new house, which you wouldn't necessarily use all the ground floor rooms as bedrooms, but is at least a 4-bedroom house, and that has the same parking requirements. Consequently, it isn't a change from meeting, and the additional requirements of 3.6 and 3.9 of the SPD don't apply.
So the fact that there's WLO lines outside of the house and that the next door neighbour is a disabled way, we can't consider that at all.
Well, say the fundamental judgment, and I know it's one that does cause a lot of consternation, is the nature of this house as extended, which is the baseline we have to start with, is such that a family moving into that house has a similar, not the same, of course, every family and every HMO is different, a similar likelihood of a total number of vehicles. Obviously, people living in HMOs, this is the cheapest housing available in the city. They are less likely to own multiple private cars, potentially less likely to own private cars than people in large family homes. So you balance all of those things together. That's what gives you our parking demand. In this case, we have the advantage that there is no risk of safety issues. There's double yellow lines, so people won't be parking outside because we have parking controls to manage that. And while the competition, if I can put it that way, for parking, in particular disabled parking, is of course of particular importance, and that is right next to the site, on-street disabled bays are not assigned to properties. They are created when requests are made, and if there is a need for further, because obviously people with parking and mobility issues could move into this HMO as well, and that may change the local demand. But they are that provision of a disabled bay is obviously there to help manage that lack of available on-street parking, which we know is a problem across pretty much the whole city.
Thank you, Ian.
Councillor Mason.
As you know, Chairman, I'm always interested in access to light. Bedroom 7 has got a full-length door, which is a good thing, but it's coming onto a blind wall. Is that blind wall over 2 metres high, or is it approximately 2 metres high, which is... How does it stand?
I'm just trying to see if I have a photograph, bear with me.
There was a photograph earlier.
So top left is the rear light well. I think that's just a little under 2 metres, hard to say, but that gives you a position, obviously, that...
That's approximately 2 metres high, yeah, that's fine.
So yeah, that door's coming out and obviously being a standard window, both the balcony, and that was, and just, I've been checking as we've been talking, for apologies, but the amended plan was the one that removed that bedroom 4 balcony, the balcony you can see above, and obviously both of those are altered accordingly. So standard window, bedroom 4, and that new aperture in the existing light well.
Oh, yes. Yep. Okay.
Any other questions? Any comments from members? Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, no, the reason I ask, although some didn't like it, about the National Planning Policy framework is really important, and to establish how things look from above. The deregulation of planning, and there's more of it coming, the deregulation of planning means that you can increase your property size to about 30% or thereabouts. There are some rules around it, but mostly you can get on with it. And that's why these small 3-bedroom houses, this is one, also then subsequently attract interest around multiple occupancy. And so the march of HMOs goes on, and we have to look at what we can do about it, because residents, as we heard from Councillor Swan and others, and the deputations here, Mrs. Donner, what we can do about it. The truth is not very much, because as Mr. Maguire told us just now, the National Planning Policy Framework is silent on HMOs. It says nothing about HMOs. The absolute truth of this, right at the centre of it, is if people are really serious about addressing this issue, then the National Planning Policy Framework needs to change. That means debate in Parliament, that means our MPs going to Parliament and changing it. So that's why there is an issue around it. So we have to rely, Chair, then, on our local policies. And as Kian will tell you here, and she's mentioned it many times before, that the room standards in Portsmouth, the sizes, are some of the most rigid in the region. We're tough on it. Although many people want to pretend we aren't, many people want to pretend, but in this case, we've also asked officers about the room sizes, and we have heard that even when officers agree with us, or officers explain to us that in one instance, which was described by Mr. Maguire, we actually refused it by the sound of it. The planning inspectors did not agree. So I wouldn't say that we're a rubber stamp, but we are certainly handcuffed by what can actually be achieved. And the trouble is we've got too many people telling us we can achieve more, but we can't. And if we go out on a limb, we go off to the planning inspector with some of these things, and they're unreasonable, we behave in an unreasonable way, the taxpayer gets whacked with a hefty, not fine, but a hefty costs awarded against the council. So we do have to be careful. And we also have to be careful about blaming one another for the relentless march of HMOs. In this case, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because they are on a corner. 8.47 has been achieved. The officers have looked at it very closely indeed, almost forensically, and that is increasing as we go by. So it's very difficult to see what might be done in order to resist it. But let's see what other people say.
Any other comments? Councillor Mason.
Looking at this, it meets our standards, and as Councillor Hunt has said, our standards are amongst the toughest in the country. Most other places, this would have gone through on the, without ever coming to a planning committee. I think this is well designed as an HMO. There is adequate light. Because they're double skin cavity walls, there should be no real noise problem. So I propose the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Candlish, you were next, and then I'll come to Councillor Smythe.
Most of my thunder has been stolen by Councillor Hunt and Councillor Mason, because I was going to say many of the same things, that we have high standards. I was really pleased to hear both that the residents provided good information about what was going on in the locality, and then we translated that into action and have followed up on trying to identify and licensed HMOs, because that's really important to do and often can only be done with the help of local people. And I'm really glad that this has come forward to this committee to be discussed by local councillors. But as members of the public may not be aware, the government is currently proposing to remove councillors from the planning process for all applications for less than 10 properties, and that will certainly cover all single HMOs, and they will then be made, decisions will be made by unelected council officers. Personally, I think that's going to further erode our democratic oversight and the respect and usefulness that people view local councillors, but that's above my pay grade. I can only say that having gone through this application, given the laws of the land as they are set and the rulings that the planning inspector has made previously, I can find no reason not to pass this one. And to not pass it would be to subject the council to unnecessary costs in preparing an application, and possibly the awarding of costs against it if it was judged a frivolous application to reject. The NPPF, the National Planning Policy Forum, Framework, sorry, I never get it right. But the point of the matter is that that was strengthened again in December of 2024 by this government to now require a strong reason to reject. And I cannot find one. So therefore, somewhat reluctantly, as always on these matters, I am going to support the proposal and second it.
Thank you, Councillor Candish. I'm afraid not. I'm afraid not. That's what the deputation is for. I'm really sorry. There's quite...
If I may, Chair.
Yeah. I appreciate that. There is a no, don't, you're not being told off. It's just that there's quite strict kind of rules about how this committee is. I'm sure someone can have a word afterwards, maybe.
Chair, I was going to say, in another of my roles, I'm Cabinet Member for Transport, and I will be happy to talk about this application with you directly. I will be honest, the Chair has already said that there are limits about what we can do, and the situation that you face is something that is common across the city, which is why we have many of the things that we do. But I respect the point that you make, and I accept it, and I will be happy to talk to you directly.
Thank you, Councillor Candish. Councillor Smythe.
All I was going to do was, in 2 or 3 words, to second the Councillor Mason's recommendation.
I think Councillor Candish just got in there before you, but I'm sure there'll be other opportunities. Okay, so we have a proposal to move officers' recommendations by Councillor Hugh Mason, seconded by Councillor Candish. Actually, before I get to that, I'm just, is there an alternative proposal? No. In which case, we'll, the motion has been presented, and as I say, proposed by Councillor Hugh Mason, seconded by Councillor Candish. We'll go to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? And those abstaining? Okay, so that motion is carried and planning permission is granted. Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you for coming and doing your deputations. I'm assuming everyone's happy just to push on? Yes? So the next... Should we have a 5-minute adjournment so that people can go to the toilet, etc.? All right, 5 minutes. Just to remind people that the meeting is still being recorded, so just be mindful of conversations. Okay, I think everyone's gathered back after a little mini break. So we will move on to the next agenda item 6, which is 47 Oriel Road. And so over to, is this Ian again? Ian to present. Thank you.
Thank you. 47 Oriel Road. This is the one item on today's agenda, which is a change of use from an existing HMO, C4 HMO, to 7 beds, so adding one person. So without wanting to spoil the surprise, officers are satisfied that plan permission is not required in this case, in line with the extensive guidance we previously provided, and therefore an unconditional recommendation is provided. However, we have, of course, examined the application within the papers for you. This is an application where we have a variety of bedroom sizes throughout, and they're detailed in paragraph 8.6, all, however, over 10 square metres, but I'll come to some details on that in a second. So there is the property. Middle Oriel Road there, that's what it looks like. There you can see the number of existing HMOs, so there's 4, including this one. That number doesn't change, of course, but that's 4 out of 75, 5.33%. There is the existing floor plan. I would draw your attention to the snug, the ensuite snug on the ground floor there. That is what is changing to bedroom 7, which is the only change within this. Consequently, that internal change to occupancy, adding one person to the scheme, is why officers are satisfied plan permission is not required. There are the elevations. Obviously, there are no changes to that. I'll leave you back with that. I won't belabour the point around the 6 or 7 changes. This is a classic example of that, where we will be satisfied plan permission is not required. I will, however, just take the opportunity to point out in advance of being asked a question about it, bedroom 4, which is obviously the only scheme which actually has a corridor into it. This is quite a wide corridor. There's certainly room for shelving or hanging within there, so it isn't just the width of a doorway. It is, of course, an existing bedroom in the existing HMO, so that doesn't change. If members were purely academically interested in how big the room is, if you take the corridor, the full corridor out, it would probably be about 9.97 square metres. So a pedant could identify that as less than 10 square metres if they wished. The communal floor space, though, is very large in this one, 35 square metres, so well above, even if all the rooms were 6.5 square metres, the minimum size, this would still be compliant with your policy. So any concerns about bedroom 4 size become moot when noting the large communal floor space provided compared to what we see in other authorities. Consequently, this is fully compliant with all your policies, albeit it requires no planning permission. There are nothing on the SMAT. We did have Mr. Thorpe as a deputation. He is not here. We do have Councillor Simpson who wishes to make a deputation today. Happy to answer any questions, of course.
Thank you. So we have 2 deputations. So the first one is in favour, and that is Carrie-Anne again. So over to you.
Thank you. So, although 47 Oriel Road was not designed originally by Apicore, the owner of this property has employed Apicore to handle the application for the 1-person increase. I'm here today as a sui generis application, not that of the Certificate of Lawfulness, for the increase of 1 person, to allow members to consider the house and its merits and the spacious accommodation on offer. Ian Maguire has already brought up about the Tunnel 4, but I was going to address that particular, the tunnel-like entrance that I know members don't like seeing. In this particular case, the width is more usable and allows drawers or similar to be placed along that wall, but we have done the calculations on and discounted the entire entranceway, and the square area of the room is 9.78. So as the communal area exceeds the 34 square metres, as Mr Maguire has already said, all the bedrooms could be this minimum 7.5 to and still be fully compliant. However, all the 6 bedrooms in this property all range from 10, or the other 6 bedrooms range from 10 to 17 square metres, so it fully accords with policy and exceeds all space standards. Councillor Swan brought up about a couple of issues. He mentioned that he brought forward some concerns from neighbours. So I just wanted to stress macerators are not typically used in these HMO properties. In fact, I can't remember one for many years where we specified a macerator in a property. Also, kitchens he mentioned with cooking facilities. Again, we wouldn't get a licence. They wouldn't be licensed if we put kitchens with cooking facilities in them. At most, we have seen some of our clients in the larger rooms that are sort of 14 square metres put a small fridge in there and a small bit of worktop in case tenants would like to make a sandwich. They're not allowed cooking facilities in there. That's in their tenancy agreements. It's managed by licensing and also managed by inspections. So I just wanted to stress there is no increased fire risk from kitchens within these properties. Other than that, the application is fully compliant with policy, and I trust that you go with officer recommendation today. Oh, also there is an appeal at 27 Balfour Road that was refused by this committee on space standards and upheld, not upheld at appeal, was dismissed at appeal based on usable space within the communal area. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Carrie-Anne. It probably demonstrates how many of these meetings you've attended over the years. Thank you. So we have also requested a deputation by Councillor Russell Simpson. So over to you.
Yeah, I've also been here a few years as well now, in the FO3 Planning Committee. Thank you, Chair and Committee. Residents are under no disillusion that this is probably a done deal, as they like to say it is, which is a real shame. Because it seems to be, it's always like this, you know, going from C3 to a C4, C4 to sous genre. Unfortunately, Henry can't be here today, but I know that he has some real questions, you know, as a resident. So, and I think these are real concerns that I think, if can't be considered for this planning application today, should at least be noted of the concerns. So he asks, or we ask, how is crime taken into account when allowing plan permission? The reason residents of Aura Road are saying this is because of late the road has witnessed, and I quote, immigration control, probation services, armed responses, and PC interim management orders. So parts of the council know what issues the community have and experienced. Are these departments communicating to each other, a licensing especially? Then there is, of course, the one extra car not making an impact. Even when a tenant of a recent HMO article, in a Hampshire-wide article, said HMOs do bring more cars. So even the tenants of the HMOs know fully well they bring more cars. Residents are also concerned, and this is something I've been lobbying for years, and it has been mentioned today, to be fair, that the HMO register lacks transparency, accuracy, and details. And Henry rightfully points out that if the private sector did this, the HMO or IT manager would be fired. And I think that is a fair comment too. While we hope the committee refuses this application today, I do hope the issues raised today has a knock-on effect for the department to investigate into legal, illegal HMOs, the slow amount of licenses coming out, as well as the fact that it is increasing crime in these areas quite significantly. I believe there's going to be more of that as it goes on.
Thank you for your deputation. Okay. There's no extra information, I believe. No. So it's over to members with questions about this application. Councillor Smythe.
The first thing we actually have to do is to decide whether it needs planning permission or not. And the officer's recommendation is, as ever with these, and we've had a habit of saying they do need planning application, but it does say here the officers recommend that no planning permission is required for just adding one person into a HMO. And here we can see that the standards are high. We even see that it's a south-facing window in bedroom 7, and good access to natural light. Because I think when we do find things are substandard, we are urged into discussing an application and assuming it needs permission. I would like to move, contrary to our normal practice, that this does not need a planning application, a planning permission, because it's only one person. It's not a fundamental change of use from a single family dwelling to a house, and we have the benefit here of seeing the argument for giving it permission, which helps. But I think now is the time I'd like to make a stand against our previous habit of saying that these need a planning permission. The spur for it, I must say, is a very useful report that we received from planning officers showing how often such applications, if we were to refuse them, are overturned by planning inspectors, and how much money, officer time, our time, is wasted going through this, where officers are telling us that we do not need a planning permission to increase just by one room. And I'd like to start us off in a new habit. Maybe it's for a short time because planning law will change, but I do feel now increasingly strongly that I would abstain from that, because I don't believe we should be giving a planning permission for something the officers say should just be deemed okay.
Thank you. I note your comments. I just want to come back and see if anyone's got any questions, because that's more of a comment.
We always do the question of does it need planning permission before we start the discussion.
Beg your pardon. Beg your pardon.
Chair, is Councillor Smythe moving the officer's recommendation then, or not? Just wanted to check.
The officers actually have got so used to us asking,
Yeah.
agreeing that this should need planning.
Does it need planning permission?
The question is that we always put first here is, do we agree that it needs planning permission, or does it need planning permission? And I'm saying we need to have that discussion about whether it needs planning permission again, and I am proposing that it does not, in line with the officer's comments, which are very clear.
Thank you. No, she's saying that it doesn't need planning, so it's the first bit. Councillor Hunt.
Yes, I completely disagree. Whilst we can, we should scrutinise all these applications as best we can. The Labour Party may not want scrutiny, but I do. And I want localism, and I want this committee to look at these things because they're very high profile. A lot of concern we see demonstrated every single day of the week about HMOs, and the people need confidence in the scrutiny of this council. That may well change in due course, as Councillor Smythe accepts. The government is going to change it, so we are basically rendered nothing. So there will be no scrutiny. But whilst we can, I believe that there is a reason to say that this needs planning application. The increase in one room and one person living in the house adds to the increase, worries about lack of car parking provision, which is already oversubscribed in this area, and the impact on local services and infrastructure, including sewage and drainage. And of course, the thing that worries people a great deal is, increasing the strain on GPs and dentists. So, and of course, the overdevelopment of the property. Why didn't they come first of all and do 7 rather than the 6 right now? So there you are. It does need looking at. We should vote that it does need planning permission, and we should then go on to give the local councillor and Ciaran the opportunity to explain to us why we should grant planning permission.
Councillor Candlish.
In brief, I'm going to support Councillor Hunt. I was going to say more or less the same thing. I think there's a principle here. What I thought the committee was doing quite a good job of was kind of looking at each other around the table and saying, we recognise that this is a pro forma, but it's a pro forma that we want to go through as the committee to demonstrate that the councillors are listening to the concern and recognising that just adding people is also a form of development. So I would propose doing it, and I would hope that we take this as a precedent where we agree to do so every time on a very rapid basis, because we nearly always use the same set of words.
Can I just seek some advice on, do I just go straight to a vote on whether we're voting on whether it needs planning permission or not, or does Councillor Smythe need a seconder for her proposal?
Firstly, I think Ian probably wants to come back and comment.
Sorry.
I can answer that question. Just to be absolutely clear, as members have been told many times before, it is a planning judgment, albeit one well vested in law, about the need for plan permission. It is and will never be a pro forma. You've had costs awarded against you for doing that. It is an individual planning judgment on the individual case. What you need to have is a reason why the addition of one person to the 6 occupants of 47 Oriel Road, PO2 9EG, requires planning permission. So it's not a pro forma. That is obviously language I would invite you to withdraw to
I
prevent
withdraw the
appeals
language
being...
unreservedly,
yeah.
and I'm happy to provide a statement of it in respect of this property, should I be required to do so.
Therefore, and then to answer the question, so this is not a judgment in of itself, it is an element of the broader judgment. The custom and habit of this committee, and it's entirely in your gift, Chair, is being to take a vote on the matter. So as it is not the actual motion, it would not require a second. It is part of the discussion to get a sounding of the room before motions that would then be laid, which would be incorporating that or not.
Just to say, I'm taking into account this property. I welcome the scrutiny we gave to the application from a dwelling house to a 7-person HMO in the previous debate. That was absolutely appropriate. But I am coming to the view, I've come to the view that this is not an appropriate use of either officer time or our time.
Thank you, and thanks for bearing with me. So I'm going to ask whether I could have an indication from the committee about whether they think that this needs planning permission.
So do we put our hands up for yes or no?
Yes, yes. Could you put your hands up if you think that this, before we discuss this, it does need
Chair,
planning permission?
I think Councillor Candlish seconded my proposition that it does need planning permission, and then we vote on it.
Okay.
And I'd like to second Councillor.
Okay. So that's what I was getting a clarification on. I think I just need to ask, for those people who think that this needs planning permission, please can you indicate by raising your hands? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes. So that decision has been made. I don't think I need to go to the next. Now we come to discuss. You do need to find out if we're abstaining or... That's anyone is abstaining or against the fact that this needs planning permission. Okay, thank you.
Chair, do we actually record this information? There is only a decision recorded that I've seen.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Councillor Kent.
Councillor Smythe raised an issue about whether it was necessary to differentiate between abstaining and voting against. And my understanding was that we do not keep a record, or I would be quite happy for such a record to be kept on each decision.
There's 2 different sections to the vote. You're voting whether it needs planning permission or not. So those in favour of it, and then those against and those abstaining. So it's the normal voting process for each part of the on the 2 votes.
Thank you. Every day's a learning day. Right. So now on to looking at this individual application, which so are there any questions to Mr. Maguire about the presentation around this property? Councillor Mason.
It's my usual one on the fenestration of bedroom number 7, which was snug. Now, whilst I've always been aware that snug equals bedroom in waiting, the requirements for light in a snug are different, I think, from what we would reasonably expect in a bedroom. So how is bedroom 7 lit by that window? How big is the window?
I would have to ask the case officer to give me some specific dimensions. I'm not sure how those dimensions would help you. What I can say, it is a standard room window, which we deem to be adequate to light what is not. These are large rooms compared to bedrooms, but they're only 10 or so square metres, and consequently, with its normal rectilinear form and a south-facing orientation, we're satisfied that the light going into that room is adequate to provide a good living environment.
Paragraph 8, 8 and 8, 9.
I think, however, I have the right, which I did, to question on questions on all of the information which is being provided for us.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Just as
Councillor Hunt.
a matter of procedure and process, now we've moved on to onto the planning application. Have I got it wrong that the deputation can not have another go, but can make his or her deputation on the actual application? I think that's how it works. I'm not sure.
No, this is just one application. There's just 2 votes within it if you decide it needs planning permission.
All right, I've got it now. Thank you, Chair. So I have a question then.
Okay, question, Councillor Hunt.
Right. So I was hoping to hear Councillor Simpson again. I have made a couple of notes. I want to understand from the planning officer, Mr. Maguire, is Councillor Simpson mentioned crime and antisocial behaviour and wondered where that fitted into the regime of considering these matters. He did point out a few things that happened along Oriel Road, which I'm going to look into as well. But where does it sit in the hierarchy of investigating looking into these matters?
Planning doesn't have a hierarchy. It has things that are material to planning considerations and things that are not. As members should be aware, obviously, a fear of crime is a material planning consideration where it is reasonably based. The deputation made didn't specifically identify that HMO dwellers committing crimes. We are aware from the data that we can access, it is very aged now, that there is a slight difference in the number of antisocial behaviour complaints, because obviously that's data we gather because they come through the council. That is why you have policy PCS 20. If there wasn't a fundamental difference in the nature of occupancy between HMOs and other small low-cost housing units, we wouldn't need such a policy. So it is a piece of common ground, if you will, on fairly aged and not particularly statistically robust, but published and adopted evidence that HMOs do result in activities that have antisocial elements, and obviously that does wander into areas of criminality as well. So I wouldn't wish to dispute as an average, an occupier of an HMO may be more likely to commit a crime than an occupier of a dwelling house, but similarly there is no actual evidence before the council that that is the case, and consequently the fear of crime arising from adding one person to an existing HMO, I would say, while I can't say is an immaterial consideration, because members know almost nothing is immaterial, the amount of weight I would give it is almost infinitesimal.
I understand all that, and the reason I do talk about hierarchy, even though some don't want me to talk about it, is the fact that crime is increasing in this country. And we have a paragraph dedicated to highways. We have a paragraph dedicated to the planning officers. But there's no paragraph in this report dedicated to crime and the prevention of crime. Now, I understand when you're doing planning, you should be looking to design out crime. And that was one of the fundamental basics of planning, is to design out crime. But we never, ever hear anymore. And I raised this years back when I first joined the planning committee, about crime and how you prevent crime and how you design out crime, something that we should be doing, I think, is a matter of course, but seems to have fallen away. So that's why I mentioned it's a really important aspect of it. And Councillor Simpson brought fair evidence, quite frankly, as to why we should be talking about it more in these reports.
So to answer that as a question, as members are aware, planning committees are not a comprehensive statement of every matter considered within the application. It is a summary of the key and most pertinent matters. Adding one resident to an existing HMO, I'm unsurprised to see there isn't a paragraph in respect of managing out crime. There is obviously no design intervention one could make regarding this in respect of crime. It may well be a significant factor when dealing with, for example, well-known developments that are linked to higher crime or antisocial behaviour, or matters dealing with proximity to public rights of way and both passive surveillance, lighting, CCTV, obstruction, those matters. If it is relevant to the report, it would be included and discussed in more length by officers. I go back to the point I can see barely any relevance to this application of crime in this case, and while Councillor Simpson has referenced a number of cases where crime has been evident in Oriel Road, again, the causality link between the additional resident, proposed additional resident 47 Oriel Road, and that is clear to me, to be polite. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move to comments then. Councillor Hunt. Sorry.
My main concern really is just about the cumulative effect of just adding 1 or 2 bedrooms to these HMOs. These areas are very saturated already, both with vehicles and people, and I do think that if this trend continues, then we will find that it leads to a community imbalance. And I do believe that this is an overdevelopment of the property.
Any other comments? Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, well, I'm going to keep on going on about crime so long as I can in this committee, and for as long as this committee actually exists. I'm sure it exists in some sort of form in 20 months' time, but quite what it's going to look like, I've no idea. But one thing I do know, scrutiny is going to drop dramatically. Absolutely it will. And I want to thank Councillor Simpson for his deputation to do, and indeed Kieran, who does a very good job too. And I won't lose sight of the fact that when these HMOs go through, whether we like them or not, the standards internally have risen dramatically since I've been involved in this committee over some 25, 26 years. The investigations that the officers do are tremendous. They do bring accurate information so far as they can bring it. And there are some issues around the licensing register that we do know about and that are being put right as we speak. Going to this actual application, I know the street very well. I used to live there along with Richard in Oriel Road. And these houses are huge. They really are very, very big indeed. And we used to live in what would be this room that we're talking about now, and it is quite large. It really is important. This additional, Councillor Cordy's right, this constant addition of one more person. If we're actually able to go back and look at all the decisions that we've made in this particular area, that's a lot more people living there. And whether any of us like it or not, that is a lot more cars. Because the truth of the matter is people do use cars, whether we like it or not. But the trouble is HMOs, again, whether we like it or not, this HMO, this new person living, it gives a person somewhere to live. And the reason that this is happening is because not enough houses have been built since the war. And people are scurrying around looking for somewhere to live. So who's going to deny them that? This is the tension that we have. People need somewhere to live. But it's that cumulative impact on the existing community already that has to be balanced against this, and this is where I agree more and more with my independent colleagues. I think that this relentless march is just too much, and it goes on and on and on. And it's not their fault, it's not our fault, it's not this committee's fault. It is a fact that the government will not fund the building of more houses. Not just this government, but every single government since the war. And this is the problem that we're in, and we need to get away from blaming one another here. The main culprit is central government, and central government of whatever colour has got to come up with plans to build more houses, more council housings, and more housing association houses. And that is where the problem lies. Not here, but because we resist it, they're going to do away with us, because we make it harder for them to push things through. They're going to do away with us, and it's outrageous.
Councillor Smythe.
I'd like to propose that we approve this application, and it's certainly adequate. The fact it has such a large living room is in its favour, and means that I will overlook the fact that bedroom 1 is 0.3 of a metre squared too small, because it's a very big communal area here, and a big house in general. I think the lighting is probably adequate. It's a south. They say it's a south-facing room, and it's the smallest room, but I accept the officer recommendation that it is habitable, and that it does have good access to natural light, although it's certainly something I'm usually concerned about. What we have to do is to recommend the conditions to go with that. Can I just take a little guidance on that? We've already got statements about cycle provision and about a number of other things here. Are there any further conditions that we need to put on to this application in order to give it permission?
No, our recommendation would be not, say there is a cycle store already constructed at the rear of the property, quite a large one. So just the standard 3-year commencement, which is
so it's a 3-year maximum, it's the habitats?
Then a condition on approved carrying out in accordance with the approved plans, and then there's conditions and legal agreements for habitats. That's what that third bullet point of 9.2 summarises. Yes. So as members have resolved that plan permission is needed in this case, we are simply recommending on that basis that 2 conditions are needed for time limit and approved plans, and then conditions and legal obligations are needed to resolve habitats. That's the gift of the applicant to decide how to deliver that, and obviously the final wording of those conditions and obligations can be delegated to officers in the usual way.
Thank you very much. So subject to the 3 conditions briefly described on page 58, I'd like to recommend that we we approve this application.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. Councillor Vallely.
I'd like to second Councillor Smythe's motion.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or proposals? Okay, so we have a motion before us to approve, having decided that it needs planning permission to approve officers' recommendations. Can I...
Chairman, just for clarity for the minutes, Councillor Candlish did suggest he could provide wording if asked for why it needs plan permission. Councillor Hunt, of course, did provide some wording. It is important that we have such wording, just to be checking whether we are utilising Councillor Hunt's wording, which for clarity was worries about lack of parking provision, local service impacts on local service infrastructure, including sewage, drainage, GPs and dentists, and also referring an issue of why they didn't apply earlier, but obviously that isn't a material planning question, so it would be that infrastructure and services and parking matter.
Are you happy for Councillor Hunt's words to be used, Councillor Candlish?
I had already moved on and ripped up my notes, so I'm more than happy to accept.
So, with those,
I am
subject to those.
into his Cape Crusader Batman.
Can I just check that there was no reference to increasing crime from HMOs in that recommendation, was there? I do find that the discussion about crime being related to single people living in
Should we just
HMOs
take the time to go through the list so that
unacceptable.
we're sure about what we're voting on? Sorry, Ian, if you could repeat that.
Was the additional person adds to worries about lack of car parking and impacts on local services and infrastructure, including sewerage, drainage, GPs and dentists.
Good words.
I would be clear, of course, officers are unable to support that judgment, but yeah, they are at least clearly defined.
Okay, so I think given that clarity, we can now move to the vote. So all those in favour? All those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. So that that was in favour of moving officers' recommendation. No, it wasn't in favour of moving officers' recommendations.
grant plan permission having confirmed
That's
that
it.
plan permission is required for the reason as laid out, with conditions for time limit approved plans and conditions and obligations to deal with habitat mitigations.
You've said that before, Ian. Okay, so item 7 has been...
Just for the record, I thought that was 6 for the application, 2 against and 2 abstaining, am I right? Yeah,
Yes.
just for the record, that's all.
Thank you. Item 7 has been withdrawn, so we go on to the final item, which is 8, agenda item 8, which is 61 Angustine Road.
Thank you. So no debate needed here. Plan permission is required to change a existing C3 dwelling house to a 7-bed HMO. There is the property on the south side, Angustine Road, for people that like an image. 4 existing HMOs in this area, so this is the 5th out of 72, 6.94% the mix in this case. There is the property as it's originally built. Unsurprisingly, dormer windows and rear extension, as you can see illustrated on there, all covered by permitted development, including a prior notification one as detailed in paragraph 4.1. They are the 7 bedrooms proposed. The applicant has had due regard to this committee's previous comments regarding corridors and has given us a measurement, which we have checked, of bedroom 7, which is the only one with a notable corridor, and it's 10.2 plus the corridor, so comfortably over 10 metres on all of the properties, bedroom 4 being the smallest at 10.1, and consequently the 25.2 square metre communal space meets your PCS 23 standards in your SPD. It is fully policy compliant, and I'm happy to take any questions. In this case, we have no SMAT updates, and I'm going to say no. Also, Councillor Adair is here to do a representation. I've just noticed we've lost Carrie Ann.
Yeah,
so
I noticed that. So I was going to go to Councillor Adair to do your deputation. Oh, hang on, Carrie Ann's back. Sticking to order, Carrie Ann is next.
Okay, so 61 Angustine Road. Again, all the bedrooms exceed 10 square metres and the property provides 25.4 square metres of communal area, which exceeds the 22.5 square metres required. 3 of the bedrooms benefit from an ensuite and the other 4 bedrooms share 2 bathrooms and a WC, again exceeding the requirement. Rooms without ensuites will be offered at a lower price point, which may appeals to those looking for cheaper rents, making the property more affordable. And there will be a cycle store in the rear garden to encourage the use of cycling as a mode of transport. I also wanted to pick up on something Councillor Hunt was saying about the one more person argument and the larger HMOs. There is a lot of smaller HMOs going back into the family market now, and I know as the licensing scheme are updating their additional licensing register, it would be really interesting to see the sets of data from when the additional licensing scheme was implemented last time around, and how many smaller HMOs there were at that point, and how many smaller HMOs there are now, because I believe there would be hundreds back into the family let market. And then also, I've also been, because I'm a member of the Landlords Association as well, so I talk to lots of landlords and property owners, and I've more recently, there's been a lot of talk about how HMOs are playing a part in actually helping the homeless people of Portsmouth. So there have been hundreds and hundreds of people placed in HMOs or where HMOs have played a part for actually providing homes for people that otherwise would be on the street. And I actually think that's a really, really critical use of these properties, and everybody deserves a home to live in. Anyway, that's my bit done. I hope you approve in line with officer recommendation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. Okay, over to Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Chair. I find it rather strange addressing this committee, as until fairly recently I was a member. As a member of the committee, you have to base your decisions on the rules set out by the National Planning Policy Framework. I would listen to residents making heartfelt deputations, knowing that despite their concerns, the committee was largely powerless to turn down the application. Concerning this application, I've spoken to many residents in this part of North End over what they see as the relentless march of HMOs. As this part of Nelson Ward has many large Victorian-style houses, it is ideal territory for HMO development. We are frequently told that HMOs equate to a family. The truth is that no family lives in a house with both downstairs rooms converted into bedrooms. Angleston Road and surrounding roads are already packed with cars. I have often tried to park here during the afternoon when in other parts of the city parking is relatively easy. However, in this part of the city, I often find it almost impossible to find a parking space. And in fact, I was down in this part of the world about 10 days ago, and I even considered, after my frustrations not finding a parking space, I considered parking on double yellow lines, but of course, as a responsible councillor, I quickly dismissed this thought. This application can only make a bad parking situation even worse. I refer you to the Highway Officer's report at 5.1 on page 68 concerning adverse impact on residential amenity. An application for HMOs causes a considerable amount of concern for residents, and I'm sure you share their concerns. Residents feel powerless to prevent HMOs. Many residents tell me that whenever a large house comes up for sale, they wait in trepidation to see a green sticker appear on a nearby lamppost. Members, there needs to be a change in the National Planning Policy Framework, which is silent on HMOs, to address the very real public concerns. Concerning this application, there have been a number of written objections. I understand 6 in total. I know nobody else is making an application, but these committees take place during most people's working times. The usual suspects are mentioned in the deputations or their letters of concern, and they are the usual ones: increase in noise and disturbance, concerns over crime and antisocial behaviour, lack of parking provision, which has already been mentioned, additional pressure on GPs, dentists and sewerage, too many HMOs in the area, and concerns about room sizes and the loss of yet another family dwelling house. Members, for the reasons I've given, I ask you to reject this application.
Thank you, Councillor Adair. Okay, over to members for questions about this application, if there are any. No questions. So comments? Councillor Hunt?
I would like to move a proposition to refuse the application, and I refer to what Councillor Adair has mentioned previously at 5.2, where the highways officer says there may be an increase in instances of vehicles hunting for space in the vicinity. In other words, a lack of parking available in the area. This, if it were granted, this application would add a number of more cars, despite what he says about being near bus stops and so on. People bring their cars with them, and we all know that. It strikes me as a bit of an overdevelopment, but I won't win on that one. So I'm going to do it on the parking basis, but we do know too that there is an increase in the number of people living in the house, so that means more strain on GP sewage and so on. I do want to bring up about something Karen said in the nicest possible way about housing homeless people in the city, which is true. That's completely true, and that's absolutely correct. But if you're in your twilight years and you're living next door to a house, which is a case in question just up the road from here, where people are peeing outside in the front garden, climbing through windows, and there's been a death in the house, I understand, related to drugs and drug dealing going on from the house and all around the house. If you're in your 80s and your 90s, if you've lived there all of your life, and you just want to enjoy the rest of your life to the end of your term, then crime is definitely an issue. And the licensing regime, Chair, I'm afraid, I've checked, I've tried, and these are Portsmouth Portsmouth City Council tenants, Portsmouth City Council is putting these people in there. So whilst it's great that they've got somewhere to live, there's a problem around the impact on people next door. And it's a really big problem. And I have taken up, Chair, and I know you're about to stop me on it, but it's something that I wanted to air on behalf of the people concerned.
I just want to get clarity. Is that in relation to this application, or is that a general point?
It's a general point concerning, and it arose out of what Kieran said, and the general agreement that it's good that people are being housed, which I agree with. But there is a lack of ability to control things subsequently, which impacts the twilight years of a number of people in the area that we look after, and it's a crying shame.
Thank you, Councillor. I just wanted to check it wasn't in relation to this specific application. Okay, are there any other comments or indeed seconder for Councillor Hunt or an alternative proposal? Councillor Cordy.
Yeah, again, Angerstein Road, it's such a saturated road for parking and vehicles. It's the same as Oriel, same as Chichester. It seems that these HMOs are popping up in these roads that are already so saturated. So I would like to second Councillor Hunt's proposal.
I think the planning officer might want to come back in.
Okay, planning officer, come back in.
Yeah, just to mention, so in case members haven't seen it, obviously 8.26, this is in resident parking zone FD, which is 87% subscribed. So I'm not sure saturated parking is in demand across the city. We know but when we look at actually proving a case at appeal, as is noted, the actual change in parking demand in your adopted policies is small, if any, and the resident parking zone has some capacity. I mean, not a lot, 87% has been taken up, some capacity in it, so I would be very doubtful of success on appeal with such an approach.
Thank you, Mr Maguire. I'm not quite too sure who was first. Can I go to Councillor Smythe? And then I'll count to Councillor.
I just wanted to move that we approved the application in accordance with officer recommendations. I'd like us to note that the policy that we have is about mixed and balanced communities, and we're very fortunate in having one of the most strict policies about that in the country, and I hope that continues for a very, very long time. And mixed and balanced communities means giving opportunities for people from all walks of life, including those people who have previously suffered homelessness and other challenges. And this is at 6.9%. Just to remind people and the public that we don't get applications for new HMOs in the areas which already exceed 10%. We haven't had an application from my ward and for St Thomas's ward or Central South Sea, where there's an enormous concentration of HMOs over and above the 10%. For a very, very long time indeed. They get refused before they get deterred, before they get here. So just to be quite clear, this is a limited application. The idea of somewhere else being overrun to the extent that a lot of South Sea is, under our existing policy, is non-existent. So I would like us to approve this with the conditions that are on the officer's recommendations, please.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. Councillor Mason.
I wish to second that. Looking at what is being proposed for that house, it meets our standards. It is being presented by Carrie-Anne, who I think we have seen here before once or twice. And Applecore seem to manage these things pretty well, and it does meet our standards and would provide a good quality of life for the people who are living there. There is nowhere in this city where you can park with ease. Even in the delights of South Sea, I sometimes have to park a good half mile away, and that is within an area which has got parking in a parking zone. So there's nothing exceptional here for this city, and so I second the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Candish.
So, as Cabinet Member for Transport, I feel duty obliged just to explain As Cabinet Member for Transport, I feel duty obliged to just make a couple of comments on the residential parking zones. So nowhere is promised parking outside your house. So the evidence here is actually that within the neighbourhood, that the parking pressure is less than actually about a third of the city. I am not saying that it is easy to park around there by any means, because as we all know, that is not true over most of the city. Second thing is that as an HMO, it will be like any other property, limited to 2 vehicles. I have my own views about the validity of the 1.5 assumption, but the 2 is a limit, and that is the number of permits that will be issued. I'm glad we've recognised the value of the 10% policy, but if we go to this application in particular, you know, it is a Carrie-Anne was careful in her choice of words. This is a slightly less high up market HMO than some we have seen, but it is meeting all of our standards, and therefore I will be, I'm willing to, if I'm right, second the proposal, or if I'm third, I will just raise my hand at the right moment.
You're third. Any other comments? Okay, so we have 2 proposals in front of us, and I understand I take the first one first. So we have a proposal from Councillor Lee Hunt, which is seconded by Councillor Cordy, and to refuse planning permission, and the reasons stated were lack of parking, GPs, services and sewage. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. So that is clear then what we've got before us. So we'll go to a vote. All those in favour of refusing planning permission? That's 4. Those against? Against refusing? And any abstentions? No. So by my math, I think that means that motion falls. Therefore, we go on to the second motion, which is a proposal by Councillor Smythe, seconded by Councillor Mason, which is to approve officers' recommendations to approve planning permission. So if we go to the vote for approving officers' recommendation for supporting planning permission, all those in favour? All those against? And no, I'm assuming that means no abstentions. Therefore, officers' recommendation for the approval of planning permission is granted. And that brings us to the end of today's meeting. So thank you very much for people who did deputations. Thank you for people who came to observe. And most importantly, thank you to the officers for their work and for the committee. Thank you.